Welcome guys on this very short video on how to cope with your children in the next 6 months. I would like to specifically say that this is basically and mostly targeting my audience in Kenya because for us we have been just informed by the Ministry of Education that schools will open next year, that is January 2021, and of course this is pegged to how things are going to turn up. So as I promised, I'm going to do a very short but detailed video on how you can deal with your children in the next 6 months. And I would like to look at this from a point of social, psychological, spiritual, and of course intermarrying the biological components, that is bringing in the human growth and development aspect of any child and seeing how it affects how they are thinking, how they will behave, based on also the fact that they too are aware that school gets to open next year. I believe some of us have been trying to ensure that our children are in class and have done online classes. It's been about almost maybe 5 months, but remember this new change is gonna affect them because now they know they have a projection of 6 months before anything can regulate when it comes to education. So key thing is when it comes to the social aspect of life and social factor, you need to choose what you want for your child in terms of education. Every child is abled differently. There's some of our children who are creatives. That means they are very good at being, doing artistic stuff and all that. But then there are also kids in our own homes who are intellectually abled. So that means they are the geniuses, they love reading and all that. Key thing, parents, you have to tap into that one thing that your child likes, but also remember to strike a balance such that your child remains active in terms of their capacity to function well. Okay, the brain is a very important tool. Actually, everything starts from the brain, so you cannot afford to let your child not read or do anything in terms of academics just because now school will open in 2021. You have to ensure that your child is tasked to read something, to do something, based on their curriculum so that they keep their brains active. Remember, the reason why we have the older generation falling prey to dementia, Parkinson's disease is ideally going by the growth, the physical growth and development curve. By the time we are hitting our 50s, our brain starts accumulating what we call plaque, and this of course decreases the ability of the brain to be able to engage in small functions like having memory and all that. So by leaving your child idle and not challenged in terms of active when it comes to mental processes, it could mean that you're predisposing your child to such diseases. So let us be aware that our children need to be active when it comes to their mental processes, and we ensure, sorry about that, let's ensure that we are very, very intentional when it comes to their education. Choose what you want for your child. At the end of the day, there is government, but there's also your role as a parent, and you know what you want for your child. The question is, do you want your child to grasp the academic? Because when schools resume, for some people it's gonna be very easy because probably they took time to make learning a routine such that when they go back to school, it's just going to be like a revision kind of mode. For those of us who are sitting for our KCPE and our KCSE, this is the chance. You have a lot of time to revise. Actually, if you ask me, I think we should have better grades recorded than any other year. Why? When you look at, that 1 year that we have to stress ourselves, going, revising and all that. Now we have more than that 1 year. We have time to go through our books. We have time to read, without any interference. So let us choose to bring out the best in us, to bring out the best in our children. And this really depends on you as a parent. Remember, our children are always looking at us. And someone told me something the other day. A child is a sponge, is a sponge. So when you squeeze a sponge, it will sort of like, reshape itself to your liking. Pali umeshikilia, that's where, the curve will be. So your child is a sponge at this point. When you are able to, show them what you expect of them, sit down with them, have discussions, allow them to also negotiate what they feel works for them, it becomes a very good starting point for you to be able to walk the next 6 months, with your children. For the ones who are parenting younger children, we know that especially for the kids who are less than 13, play is something that is really, really needed. It's a very important tool in their social life. Now, COVID happened and we have to keep our social distance. We have to wear our masks. We have to make sure that we sanitize. I don't know how it is out there because I don't, for me, I've tried to confine my children in the house. But of course, there are those parents who feel they can go out there. They're giving their children permission to go out there and play. Key thing, even as you engage, even as you let your child go out there and play, please make sure that you condition them to faithfully sanitize. Anytime they walk out of the house and come back, the first thing they need to do is to make sure they shower. Okay, they of course sanitizing, I believe, go through the whole 100. Don't do it just maybe. Let them go in, shower, because you don't know at what point where the contamination was. Remember, even our own garments can be points of contact for this virus. So remember to emphasize and lay out their expectations, because at the end of the day, they will try to negotiate and they will try to push you to allow them to go and play with maybe 1 or 2 of their friends. But key thing is they need to stay healthy. So try and make sure that even as they play, because this is a very, very important aspect in their growth. And you can imagine having to stop them, from doing this for a whole year. Some of us, maybe we barred our children from going out there to play with other children from February. Now you can imagine a whole year and your child is just at home. Maybe she's an only child or he's an only child. It can really be challenging. So you need to know how to maneuver through this so that your child does not miss on their social aspect. Not everything can be done via social media. We have PlayStation, we have what. But remember, the physical aspect of play is very, very, very important in a growing child. So please ensure that this is done, but also within a very safe zone. Now let us move on to the teenagers, because I've dealt with the younger children, but then we have the teens, that is 13 to 18. These are our young children who are going through biological, what we call a hormonal shift. Of course, physically, there's all these things happening to them. There are changes. They want to get a self-identity. There's so much that is going on in their world. And part of the things that teenagers, encounter or, find challenging is, being confined, first of all, because remember, their self-identity, their sense of worth comes from their peers. So you find that they will insist on maybe being on their, phones, chatting with their friends. But also remember, being teenagers makes them very, very curious. So that's why sometimes it's very, very hard to contain a teenager in the house, where they will tell you they feel they want to go to, to see a friend and all that. Now, when we look at the curfew hours, they've been extended, and this is in line with our Kenyan parents. I know there's some of us who are watching us from other countries, but allow me to just use Kenya as my example. Our curfew starts at 9 p.m. at night. And going by this, it will be very, very hard sometimes to contain our teenagers in the house, because they would want to operate in the dark, based on the fact that They're also curious to experiment other things. You know, they're trying to form relationship with their opposite sex, and they, you know, they're all these things, you know, that they want to, you know, really, can I say, you know, they're trying to fill many, you know, blanks and all that. So at the end of the day, it becomes very hard to contain them in our homes. So it would be very important for those of us who are dealing with teenagers to really emphasize on the timings. We recently, you know, saw what happened in Kenya. 380,000 teenagers getting pregnant, and this has been mostly attributed to COVID-19, because parents feel that, you know, the children have been at home, so they have had that podium, they've had that space where they can do things that are not really morally upright. Okay, and I do agree, but also at a certain level, I tend to disagree, because as parents, we are supposed to mentor our children. We are supposed to be their, you know, the number one counselor. I always say, you know, before you take your child to a therapist for counseling, they should know you as a friend. They should know that they can confide in you. Don't just throw your children to counselors, okay? It's very important that therapy starts from home. Make your homes safe for your teenagers. As I said, as a teenager tries to find an identity, they look for solutions in the wrong places. But if you can learn to curb, you know, those areas where they, you know, that those areas that are red zones for them, where they get, you know, they get lost, it would be very good for you. It would be very important for the family structure, because then you'd be able to avoid unnecessary challenges that will come, you know, out of our teenagers indulging in drugs, our teenagers indulging in other things that may not really, you know, help them have a better future. So at the end of the day, we need to really be strict about timings. Parenting requires some level of flexibility, some level of negotiation. And remember, I talked about parenting styles. There's authoritative, and each parenting style has its own pros and cons. But at the end of the day, I always say this: no matter you know, what kind of parenting style you want to use for your family, for your children, it's very important that you create that safe space where the children can come to you and give you suggestions and just negotiate with you. Remember, they're growing up, they're watching you as a parent, and they're picking up from your own behavior. So if you're always this angry parent who is not flexible, who goes by the rule, your way is the only way, then expect that from your children in the future. Okay, so if you want to see a child behave in a certain way, show them. Even when it comes to curfews, don't tell your children to be home by 6 and then you're the one who's walking in at 9. Okay, try and make sure that by that 6 you yourself are at home. And I'm talking, you know, to all those parents. I know we are struggling to, you know, these are hard economic times. But remember, whenever you're stating a rule, be the first person to execute it as a parent. Because if you can make it, you know, in terms of achieving that rule, in terms of making sure that you are the first example, your kids will find it very easy to follow suit. So that remains very important. You will also need to limit social media. Unfortunately, technology has its pros and cons, but I tend to look at it, you know, more of the cons, because we have seen our children have been able to access porn sites and sites that really adult content that should not, you know, be exposed to. So for those of you who are still giving your children mobile phones and not caring which sites they visit, this is the sad reality. A lot of our teenagers are masturbating. Okay, and this is based on the fact that they are able to access any tool that they need to, to enable, there are things that we call enablers. So you have the triggers, first of all, which is what they see, what your children see. So it affects how they think. But the worst is when now they get that tool that they need to take them from point A to point B. A good example is your child might have watched a video on how to steal. Okay, so that is the trigger for stealing. But then in the house you've kept a gun. And since they have already gone through basic classes on how to steal, if you give them the gun, they will go and execute the act of robbing someone. So at the end of the day, if social media is that tool that is going to end up your child and end up taking your child or pushing your child off the cliff of drugs, off the cliffs or the cliff of sexual whatever, off the cliff of laziness, even certain attitudes, then it's time for you to try and limit that tool, that element that now creates that enabling behavior. Okay, so those are key points. And I would like, I'm working on a mentorship program for teenagers, especially because I'm aware of the challenges that teenagers are going through. My poster will be up soon, but even so, there's so many teenagers, all over the world. So I would like to encourage parents who are listening to me to please enroll your child anywhere there's something that your child can gain. When it comes to Zoom meetings and all that, please encourage your children to listen in. Why? Because it is part of training a child. It is part of reconditioning a child, their mindset, how they think. Sometimes it just takes hearing that one word and a life is changed. So if we can use motivation, okay, if we can enroll our children in spaces, in forums where they can be motivated, they can be challenged to become better versions of themselves, that would really, really, really help. Now, psychologically, as I said, we have seen our children reacting to this extension of normal schooling based on their personality. As I said, we have the lazy children, we have the most active children, we have, our children are reacting to this based on their personality and temperaments. And for those of you who have not listened to my video on parenting and as well as personality and temperaments, please look through it. I just uploaded my videos recently, so at least there's this. I've given you the avenue where you can always listen, and learn, because at the end of the day, everything starts from our mental spaces. So please watch my video on personality, and also, if you can, listen to the languages of love, because language of love, most people think that languages of love are pegged to our spouses, but actually languages of love are also pegged to our children. So please try and learn the language of love of your child, because that becomes an avenue for you to be able to get through to your child. Okay, so if your child also loves gifts, this becomes a very good way or a very good platform for you to be able to condition your child. How? If maybe you have set goals and you say maybe your child needs to spend maybe 3 hours reading, and they're able to achieve that, and you're able to certify that they've done this, it's good to come in and reward them. You see, so by rewarding them, they would want to please you more as a parent, and this is what we call conditioning. So very, very important that you also understand your child's personality and temperament. You also understand their language of love, and using these two things, you can be able to not only negotiate but create an environment that will allow your child to thrive, okay, in terms of communication, in terms of many other things that happen in homes. Okay, so that is one thing, and I emphasize about stimulating your child's brain by allowing them to just read. Okay, so that we cannot evade, because 6 months is such a long time, and your child is growing. They're also trying to stretch, their brain is also like a rubber band, so they're also trying to stretch. Please please, parents, even if you do not have, money for, paying for the education services, because not all of us are able to afford online schooling. Please make sure that you can at least sit down, spare 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours with your child. Go through books, read, discuss, so that your child, remains alive when it comes to their academics. Remember, I've emphasized on being that watchful eye. A lot of us are working from home, but then again, there's some of us who have to report to various offices. So at the end of the day, I would really emphasize that you watch on your children. I would advocate for cameras in homes, but again, as I always say, we all come from a very different space and walk in life. For those of you who are not able to maybe intermarry technology with what you have, in terms of human factor, it's very, very important that you keep on checking on what your child is doing. It's good that they also know that you're very much interested in their lives and you're watching every step they take. Sometimes we want to give our children freedom, but this becomes the very tool that takes them to their graves. Why? You allow your child to take the vehicle, you'll give them pocket money, to go out there. You don't even care what they're doing with that money. And at the end of the day, these two things end up being a recipe for disaster. Why? Probably the money you've given them will end up being used to buy drugs, and you do not know. And because you have allowed them a lot of freedom that they can go and even sleep over, at their friend's house, being teenagers, and knowing that they are very curious and very, they're in this space where they want to experiment, then creates, a lot more that brews negative repercussions. So when a child knows that you're always watching over them, and you're always, you're concerned about them in a very positive light, then there's also that mutual respect between you and your child. Remember, communication remains key, and especially between us and our teenagers. It's very, very important. It's so sad when we see our young girls or our young boys going to tell, our house domestic managers, what they're going through, and not feel free to approach us as parents. That shows that there's a problem when it comes to communication. So I've always said, being harsh will never help a teenager. It might, but maybe for a very short time. I'm this kind of, I've parented a teenager. He's now past the teenage age stage, and I now have a teenage and a second teenager. So I've learned from my experience with the first teenager, and I can allow myself to be vulnerable in this space and say that sometimes being strict will not help. I've been a strict mother, but I realize that sometimes it does not help. So you need to create that open space where a child can communicate to you freely about anything. I always say, for those of us who have, especially girls, when they're having the infections, even for the boys, because it spreads across. I mean, even a boy can have an infection. They should feel comfortable to come to you and tell you, Mom, I am sick, and this is the situation. Or Dad, I'm not feeling well, and this is the problem. And not feel like this is a taboo, to tell my parents that I'm having, I have a sexually transmitted disease. Remember, at the end of the day, parenting means that you are your child's biggest fan, and you are your child first therapy. And above all, you are the one to motivate your child. So very, very key, communication channels should be left open for our children. And allow me to end here. I'm going to be uploading a second video on how to still deal with our teenagers when it comes to sexuality, addiction issues, and of course, from a space of being knowledgeable, and also from just, from that experience that I have had. As I like to put it, my right is not the only right. Please, if you have any, feedback, if you have any suggestions, let us do this together. Let us build each other as parents. Remember, if we can be able to build our children into great, great leaders of tomorrow, then we will be building our society. But when we have children who are, are running around with defeat mentality syndromes, then remember, then we are brewing a recipe for disaster in the society. Why? Because they're going to be the drug addicts. They're going to be, there's going to be a lot of dysfunctions that we're going to see later in life from our children. So remember, we have to do this as a community. You cannot raise a child on your own. There's always been, you always need that breather for your child, whereby if things, go haywire, or if you're in a conflict with your teenager, they can be able to approach someone else who you trust, and talk to them about the issue. So till next time, thank you so much for joining in. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. This is all about mental wellness, okay? This is all about mental wellness, and it starts with us, okay? It starts with us. No one else can do this. It has to be us as parents. So thank you so much, and God bless you.